Dear students, in the last class you all had studied about effects of force. Yes, now we are familiar with various effects of force which are basically push or pull generated by the force. This force of pull or push directly act on a body, or they may act through a connector, okay, which may be rigid or non-rigid, or these forces may act at a distance. Okay, so in today's class let us study about the types of force which is acting on a body, how the forces are acting on a body. So the two types of force, there are two types of force which we are going to study. The first type, that is contact force, and the second type, that is non-contact force. Okay, there are mainly two types of forces. They are contact force and non-contact force. So what do you mean by contact force? So contact force means a force which is applied on an object by making a physical contact is called as contact force. Okay, so a force exerted by one object on another when they are in contact with each other. That means by making a physical contact or by touching the object, we are applying a force. So for example, if you stand back of a car, whether the car is going to move? No, because you are not applied the force. So when you are going to push it by making a physical contact, then only the car is going to move, right? So that means here this example which is a contact force. That means we are making a physical contact with an object and we apply a force. So this kind of force is called as contact force. So examples, if you take contact force examples. So in daily activities, we are using the muscles. That means we are applying a force on some objects. It may be for lifting or just pushing, pulling. So we are making a physical contact with the object. So these are contact force. So the first, that is muscular force, and the second one we are going to study, that is frictional force or force of friction. Okay, contact forces are of two types. They are muscular force and force of friction. Okay, so next let us study about non-contact force. Non-contact force means a force exerted by one object on the another without any contact with each other. That means the force is applied on a body through a distance. So these forces act through space and do not make a direct contact with the body. Okay, so the forces which is acting on a body which is at distance and there is no physical contact, okay, without making touching a body at a distance, at a distance the force is applied on a object. So this kind of force is called as non-contact forces. So non-contact forces are forces exerted by one object on another without any contact with each other. So non-contact forces are of three types. They are magnetic force, electrostatic force and gravitational force. I think all this you all have heard. About magnetic force also you all have studied. You all have studied about electrostatic, and also you have studied about gravitational force in your lower classes. Okay, you may have heard this words magnetic, electrostatic and gravitational. Now let us study in detail about it. Okay, so what is magnetic force, what is electrostatic force, what is gravitational force? Let us study about it. So these are the two types of forces. The first one, contact force and non-contact force. So if you just show it in a flow chart, you can see here forces are of two types, that is contact and non-contact force. So contact force is divided into two types again, that is muscular force and friction force. Non-contact force, which are the non-contact force? Magnetic force, electrostatic force and gravitational force. So non-contact forces are of three types. That is magnetic force is a non-contact force, electrostatic and gravitational force. Now let us study what is contact force, that is muscular force and friction force. Yes, so in contact force, the first one, that is muscular force. Yes, what do you mean by muscular force? Yeah, all living beings need energy for living, right? This energy is converted into force for doing various activities. So in our daily life, we are using doing some activities. So the force is essential for this doing this activity, right? So the force is essentially produced by the muscles of our body. Okay, so the it may be for the living beings, so the muscles which provide the force. So this force produced by the muscles of a living being is called as muscular force. Okay, so muscular force is the force exerted by the muscles of our body. So we are using this muscular force for various activities. So when we lift or push, pull, stretch or compress, so we use our muscular force. For example, lifting of heavy weight or pulling of wheel cart, pushing a lawn roller or stretching a chest expander, it may be, or while rowing a boat. So for all these cases where the muscular force is required, for example running it may be, walking it may be, cycling. So in all these cases we are using muscular forces where the energy is applied in the form of muscular force. However, if this force required is too large and our body is incapable of producing it, so that time we use muscular force of animals. For example, bullocks are used for ploughing field. So in the same way, horses are used for moving carriages. Yeah, horse cart. Next, donkeys and camels are used for carrying heavy loads, and elephants are used for moving heavy logs in some jungles, right? So sometimes we use non-living things or objects for performing certain job. For example, we are using some machines, right? For example, we use axe for cutting wood, knife for cutting fruits, and vegetables for cutting vegetables also we use knife. So in the same way, hammer is used for driving nail into the wall. In performing all these above activities, so we use our muscular force, right? So animals like bullocks, horse, camel, donkeys, elephant also use muscular force to perform various tasks. You can see it in the picture how the muscular force is applied, right? So here some you can see the animals are also using its muscular force. Here you can see the horse which is pulling the cart, right? So here the you can say donkey here, right? So where it is applying a force. In the same way, camel is applying a force. So which force it is? That is muscular force. Here the cycler who is cycling, right? So here also by for pedaling we are applying muscular force. So here you can see, right? So in all these examples where we use muscular force, this force, muscular force, is applied by making a physical contact. So muscular force is a contact force. So now next let us study about force of friction. Yes, what is friction? So when force of friction is the force which opposes the motion of an object over a surface. For example, roll a rubber ball on the ground. So what do you observe after a few seconds? Whether it is going to be in motion continuous? No. So if you ride a bicycle, when the bicycle starts moving with a good speed, stop pedaling. What do you observe? So in both the cases, for example, in the case of rubber ball, it stops after traveling a certain distance. In case of bicycle, it slows down and then stops. So in both the cases, that is rubber ball and bicycle, they first slow down and then they are going to stop. So you'll have learnt already in last video that force can slow down or stop the body, right? So now that means here the body is going to stop. That means what? Which force is present here? So some force must be acting on a rubber ball or bicycle which stops them, is it? So this force which is stopping this rubber ball or bicycle is nothing but the force of friction. Okay. So as I explained earlier, force is a force of friction which makes the object stop. So it is produced when an object moves in contact with another object. So when this frictional force is produced, when the object is in motion, that means here the frictional force comes into play when the object is in motion, okay, and it must be in contact with the another object. So frictional force is produced when an object moves in contact with another object. So in some examples, the surface of a rubber ball and a bicycle, which examples we have taken. So in that examples also, yeah, where a rubber ball or the bicycle was in contact with the surface of the earth. So the frictional force was present in between the rubber ball and the surface of the earth. In the case of bicycle, it was a bicycle wheel which was in contact with the surface of the earth, due to which the frictional force was present, right? So you all understood. I hope you understood about frictional force. So once again you can see here a ball where a ball is rolling on a ground, gradually slows down and come to rest due to force of friction. And one thing you have to remember, that force of friction will act opposite to the motion of an object, okay. So if you stop pedaling a bicycle also, it gradually slows down and comes to stop due to force of friction, okay. So here also the force of friction is acting opposite to the direction of motion of an object. So in detail you will study it in your next class, that is friction lesson is there. In that you will study what are the effects of friction, advantages of friction and all, you all will study, okay. So what is friction? Friction is a force which opposes the motion of an object over a surface, okay. So this is a contact force because friction force exists in between two objects when they are in motion and when they are in contact with each other. So these are the two types of contact force. The first one was muscular force and the second here is the force of friction. Now let us study about non-contact force. So as you all have understood that non-contact force is a force which is acting on an object at distance. That means there is no physical contact. So at distance the force is acted. So non-contact force, the first one let us study, that is magnetic force. Okay. So what is magnetic force? I think all of you have played with a magnet, right? So what is the function of a magnet here? So here substance like iron, steel, cobalt or nickel, when placed in a coil carrying electric current, or example when you are taking the this bits of iron or steel towards magnet, what happens? There is a property of attraction, is it? So here the iron or steel objects attract towards the magnet. So this property we call it as magnetic property, okay. The substance which exhibit this property is called as a magnet. So magnet means the force by which a magnet attracts or repels object of iron, steel, nickel and cobalt is called as magnetic force, okay. So in between the magnet, when the magnet is taken near the iron nail or a steel nail. You can see here in the picture, when the magnet is taken near, it is at distance only, but these pins are moving towards the magnet. That is because of magnetic force. Okay, so here magnet, as you have studied about the magnet is having two poles, a north pole and a south pole, right? So two poles are present. You all studied in your lower classes, right? So in between north and south there is a force, right? In between two magnets also there is a force. That is the force of attraction. In between north pole and south pole of two different magnets there is a force of attraction. In the same way, south and north there is a force of attraction. That means in between two unlike poles there is a force of attraction. Here you can see the like poles, right? North north and south south. So here in this case there is a force of repulsion. That means the magnet is repelling each other. So there is a force of repulsion. So magnetic force is a force which is exerted by the magnets. Okay, force exerted by the magnet is a magnetic force. So example, you have understood the force of attraction and repulsion between two magnets, or force exerted by a magnet on the piece of iron or steel or cobalt, etc. Okay, so this force which is acting at distance, so it is a non-contact force. Force of a magnet or a magnetic force is a non-contact force. Next, let us study about electrostatic force. Yes, what do you mean by electrostatic? Yes, you may have tried playing by taking up, if you take a piece of dry paper and tear it into small bits. Place these bits of paper on a table. Now take your scale, that is plastic ruler, from your geometry box. Rub it one end with your hair. Okay, let your hair be dry. So later, after rubbing, bring this scale or a ruler toward near the ends bits of paper which is on a table. So it is seen that paper bits are attracted towards the plastic ruler. Yeah. So if you have not done this activity, try to do it. Take a ruler, just rub it to your hairs and make some bits of paper to keep it on a table, and the plastic ruler which you have rubbed to your hair, bring that plastic ruler towards the bits of paper. You can see that the bits of paper just attract towards the ruler. So why this happens? That is because when you rub the plastic ruler to your head or to the wool, so what happens? The plastic ruler gets charged. Okay, when it gets charged, and later when you bring it near the bits of paper, so there is a force of attraction due to the charged body. So this force is called as electrostatic force. Okay, electrostatic force, because here the charge is at rest, static position, so it is called as electrostatic force. So what is electrostatic force? It is a force exerted by a charged body on another charged or uncharged body. Okay, so force exerted by charged body on another charged or uncharged body. Example, a plastic straw. You can take this also example. A plastic straw charged by rubbing with paper attracts a suspended plastic straw. So here the plastic straw gets charged by rubbing with the paper and repels a suspended plastic charge by rubbing with the paper. So you can see here there is a force of attraction when the plastic straw is charged by rubbing with paper. Both were rubbed with paper where there is, and it is suspended when you bring another plastic straw. So what happens? There is a force of attraction. In the same way, a plastic straw charged by rubbing with paper repels a suspended plastic charge by rubbing with papers, right? So there is a force of repulsion. So you have to understand easy method. You can do this activity, that is with a ruler and the bits of paper you can take and you can check at home how the electrostatic force is produced. That means how the body is getting charged and how the force is applied on the bits of paper. Okay, so this is electrostatic force. So here also the force is acting at a distance. Okay, so force is acting at a distance, so this is called as non-contact force. So this is a example for non-contact force. Next, the third, that is gravitational force. Yes, whenever an object is dropped, it always falls towards the ground. You have observed it, right? For example, you can take a ripe fruits on a tree, fall towards the ground, or a stone on the top of a hill fall downwards if it is pushed. So why can't the substance rise up? Why it has to come down only? Because the force is acting, that is earth pulls all objects towards its center. So this pull exerted by the earth on the object is called as force of gravity, or it is called as gravitational force, right? What is gravitational force? Gravitational force is the force exerted by the earth on all objects. It pulls all objects towards the earth. Okay, so here also it is acting at a distance. That means there is no physical contact. It is acting at a distance. Forces are acting at a distance. So gravitational force is a non-contact force. Okay, even when you throw an object vertically upward, the force of gravity of earth at once start acting on it. Firstly, it slows down the object, then stops. It finally pulls it towards itself, that is towards the earth, is it? So here you can take an example, that is in pictures you can see a coin or a pen falls down when it slips off your hand, or a ball thrown upward falls down, or a leaves or a fruits fall to the ground when they gets detached from the plant. Water in rivers flows in downward direction. So all this is because of gravity, which is pulling the object towards the earth. Okay, so this force which is acting at a distance, and this force is called as gravitational force, which is a non-contact force. Okay, so which are the three non-contact force we studied? The first one, that is we have studied about magnetic force, electrostatic force and gravitational force. These are the three non-contact force. And which are the contact force we studied? Muscular force and frictional force are the contact force. Hope you have understood what is contact force and what is non-contact force, right? So what is contact force? A force which is acting on an object by making a physical contact is called as contact force. Two types, that is muscular force and frictional force, force of friction. Next we had studied that non-contact force is a force which is acting at a distance, and the three types of non-contact force we studied, that is non-contact force, that is gravitational force we studied, electrostatic force we have studied and magnetic force. So in the next class let us study about pressure. So hope you all have understood. Thank you.